Hi everybody. Hopefully this is currently working. I'm going to try to get chat up and running. Let's see here. Not a lot of success currently on the screen, at least. Well, anyways, I can see your chat in a different spot, or somebody. Go ahead. Uh-oh. Is currently working. I'm going to try to get chat up and running. Getting feedback. There we go. Um, Okay, I think this is working. All right, here we go. Let me mute that. Okay. Um, Sorry about that. I haven't gone live in a while. It's been a bit since I've done a live stream like this. I used to do this kind of exclusively, Facebook live streams back in the day. But trying to do something a little bit different here. And now that I think I've got that turned off, if you have any problems hearing me, certainly let me know. Although it sounded like things were coming through. RA, yes, it's working. I'm getting text. That's good. You can also write stuff in the chat if you feel like it. That's also another way to get a hold of me. I don't have my full range of motion. My hand will disappear if I reach too high up on the screen. But we are going to talk about the storm tonight. This is a classic nor'easter, and this should be pretty free flowing. This will be very different from the forecast where I go ahead and just give you all my thoughts. This is a chance for you to ask questions. They can be related to the storm. I'm sure most of them will be, but they can also be related to any weather questions you have. If I use a term that you don't understand, which I'm sure I do all the time, audio is great. Thanks, Dan. If I do any of that kind of stuff, let me know. I'm happy to answer those questions as best I can. And this should be kind of fun. We'll probably go for about 15 to probably 20 minutes, realistically, by the time I get done. I like to talk, so you never know. First of all, not much has changed with our forecast. So let me get you on to this other screen here, and we're looking at that's tomorrow evening. Sorry, let me pull up my options for this evening. Here's about where we are now, and I can actually almost touch all the way up. We're getting going. I should actually start you off with radar, but here's what I was thinking this morning as to what was going on. Uh, um, as we are getting going. Dan, that's a good question. Nor'easters tend to be certainly we get our strongest storms, not always our biggest snowstorms, but some of our strongest storms in the spring, and that happens because mostly what causes storms to get stronger is difference in temperature. And we have our greatest differences in temperature this time of year. Also in the fall, in the fall, we tend to get them more as sometimes you get really strong storms that have very strong cold fronts with them that are associated with big thunderstorms. But in March is often and we still have enough cold air around oftentimes to still be getting mostly snow. So certainly we're basically 30-year anniversary of the March 93 superstorm, which is probably in terms of northeastern storms, or really eastern half of the country storms that aren't hurricanes, that was the strongest storm maybe in a century. It was called the storm of the century in 1993. Meteorologists are terrible about with hyperbole, right? We say things over the top all the time. That was truly the storm of the century. Broke records, a ton of different kinds of records. I was actually just looking at some video of the storm and some of the model runs and everything from that the other day, and it was this one will not be quite. This one will be here. This one's impact could be just as strong, really, as the March '93 superstorm. But that storm had impacts all the way from Birmingham, Alabama, where they had whiteout conditions, if you can believe it, and I think close to a foot of snow, and a derecho that moved across Florida that had 100-mile-an-hour wind gusts. And lots of tornadoes, and a storm surge, and yeah, all the way up and down the coast. So this storm is not that big of a deal, except for in the Northeast, and it will be very strong here. Okay, let's actually look at radar. That's what we really should be looking at first. So let me change my screen view, and hopefully you can see my cursor on the screen. That's my goal here. Let me make sure I'm over in the right spot. Yeah. So let's take a look. We are starting to really get going. Let me actually just get rid of the YouTube chat viewer because I think it's just getting in the way. Making sure I'm deleting the right thing. Okay. So you can see, whoops. See, I got to get my cursor in the right place. Here we go. So one of the nice things about doing it this way is I can zoom in and out. You can see that our storm is really getting going here. And you can see that for a couple of reasons. One, you've got lots of thunderstorm activity coming, and you can see this is heading almost due north now, and this eventually will head due north. And while we are starting to get some light kind of spitty snow out there, there's some rain mixed in some of the valleys. It's mostly just kind of light and not doing much at the moment. That will increase in intensity very rapidly as we head later on tonight, as we start to get into some of this weather. And if you can see, the whole system here is kind of precipitation is kind of going. Was started off, it was going southwest to northeast. Now we're kind of going almost in a due northerly direction. Eventually, this will actually start to move in kind of a, you can almost see this trough here. And I did have a question. Somebody had texted me earlier today. Abe had texted me. He's been a patron since the beginning and also a good friend of mine. And so he had texted me with a question about what a trough is. And so let me give you a quick, I'm going to try to give a quick explanation of a trough. Let's look at a 500 millibar map here. These things are always really easy to find until you're working on things. So a trough, so like when we have a whole these are isoheights, which are lines of equal height. And this is basically the height where the 500, we're getting really technical there, and somewhat unimportant. But anyways, these lines just mean that, like, if you followed this line, you'd be at the same height, or at the surface, we'd call it, usually they're isobars, which is for lines of equal pressure. And in that case, they would be the same pressure would be found along the entire line. It's a little, we do it kind of in reverse when we go up in the atmosphere. We just pick a pressure and then we find out what height it's at, but essentially it does the same thing. And so when you have something cut off like this, you'd say, okay, this is a bit of a cut off low here. But a trough is this general area where you have like a dip, a southerly dip, in this case in the heights at the 500 millibar, and a ridge would be this would be a positive rise, basically, at least according rise in latitude, latitude, yes, latitude, as across an area. So a trough in at 500 millibars this is one right here. It does actually have a bit of a cutoff. One bar at least of cutoffness around it with the upper level low. But the trough is actually really going to happen at the mid levels of the atmosphere, and often that is where the focus of precipitation is. So I'm going to try, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right thing here. Height, vertical velocity, 700 millibars. There we go. Okay, so you still have the big kind of overall trough, but sometimes you also get a trough axis between, this is where your low pressure system is being created at the surface, and then you can kind of follow it back, and it hasn't really well developed yet, but you get an area of where you see the lines kind of bend around, instead of around just a low pressure system, kind of a whole line of a trough. It's sort of almost like a front in the mid levels of the atmosphere, and that's where the snow is being created, and so that's where there's chances for the precipitation to really be enhanced. And it looks like the trough is going to sit very much close to us. Actually, some of the models midday today had it right over the top of us, particularly the southern greens up through about basically all of Bennington and Windham County, and even a little bit further north of that. That's where the mesoscale banding, that was another term that I had a question about, also from Abe. The mesoscale banding is where you get almost like a line of training thunderstorms, except it's obviously not going to be thunderstorms, although thunder snow is not impossible with this system, but probably not real likely. And what happens there is you'll get, if you remember the storm where we got the record-breaking snow a couple of, like 3 Decembers ago, the very end of December 2020. So I guess just, 2, something, I don't know, a while ago. I got 27 inches of snow out of that storm, but areas just north of me were under the very heaviest of that band. Places like certainly Peru did. That was where they broke the record for the most 24-hour snowfall. And there's probably some spots that weren't official measurements near that also got in excess of 45 inches of snow out of that system in 24 hours. And that system, what happened there is you had in the mid-level, you have kind of a trough that sets up a little bit, which enhances the moisture, and that can tend to sometimes pivot over the top of an area, and when that happens, you just end up in these snow bands that last for a good long time. That's about as heavy a snow as I've ever experienced in my life. I think I got about 5. I did measure pretty accurately 5 inches of snow in an hour. One other time when I was actually in undergraduate school in Plymouth, we had a band kind of like that, and I was not under the heaviest part of the band because I ended up a foot and a half of snow less than places just 4 or 5 miles north of me where they were under the. So if I was getting 5 inches of snow pretty accurately measured in an hour, there's definitely chances places like that got 7 or 8 inches. That's about as much as the atmosphere can produce. But I have experienced one other band kind of like that. They're sort of like a lake effect band as well. All right, that's a lot of discussion. But yeah, certainly one of the things that is definitely a possibility with a storm. When storms rapidly intensify, those kind of bands set up. And really, if you get underneath one of them, that's how you go from, I think almost all of us stand a pretty good chance at, let me pop up the forecast snowfall totals I had for us. I think this is still pretty accurate. Let me go back to the other stream where we're looking at, and let me get rid of the YouTube chat viewer. Where we're still looking at most of us, especially in the southern counties here, at least a lot of us are at least 10 inches to probably at least a foot, basically for just about everybody in Bennington and Windham County, and most of us in, especially in the higher elevations, of Rutland and Windsor County, I'm going to get my county names right, are looking at close to a foot there as well, 10 inches maybe for some of the lower lying areas. For just about everybody gets at least 10. So like for instance, where I am, I'm in about the 16 to 24 inch range. So if I don't get any real banding, I would think I would still get 16 inches of snow out of this storm without getting into one of these real heavy bands. That's simply by just getting, almost all of us will see some periods of 1 inch to 2 inches of snow an hour tomorrow. And then that will, obviously at times that'll back off to more like, as we get towards the afternoon and things start to quiet down a little bit, that'll back off to more like 1/2 inch to 1 hour snow. But the way you get to in 24, or if some of these areas and further south that I think might get into heavy banding get to 24 to 30, which is definitely possible. Somebody is going to get 30, maybe 35 inches of snow out of this system, even though it's kind of heavy and wet. And that's going to happen because the band sits where it does. And so instead of getting 1 to 2 inches of snow an hour for several hours, you get 2 to 4 to 5 inches of snow. And all that has to do, you can get 20 inches of snow in 4 hours if you're getting 5 inches of snow an hour. And that is possible under these kinds of bands. I would anticipate that will happen somewhere. Berkshires, southern Vermont, and that's why somebody will get probably approach 3 feet of snow out of this. Definitely all the ingredients are there for that to happen. Could be a little east of us. Could be the Monadnock region in New Hampshire that gets that really heavy band as well, or it could be a little west of us, and it'd probably be a hilly terrain because you just squeeze out the moisture a little bit better there. But could be like just southwest of Albany, some of the higher terrain of the kind of the northern Catskills. So that's all possible, but we're definitely in the spot that's probably about most likely to see something like that. So, anyways, let's go back. I want to take a look at the satellite imagery because there's some stuff you can definitely see happening on satellite that's interesting. And I've got to change you over to this view. Can I make this bigger? Can I zoom in? I can zoom in. Give me 1 second. See, this is where this is different. It's not as well. It's not. Let's see here. Yeah. There we go. You would think yes, there we go. So, now my head's in the way, of course. Let me move a little bit. One of the things you can see, here's our storm getting going, and you see the feathering right here in the high clouds as you're developing these thunderstorm clouds. That is a classic indicator of very rapid surface development. This is a classic bomb cyclone. Let me get rid of the thing so you can see. So that's not, the menu's not in the way. A classic bomb cyclone. Bombogenesis, fancy meteorological term. We like to sound scary and impressive, right, as meteorologists. All it means is a drop of 10 millibars in 24 hours. This one will do more like 30 millibars in 24 hours. Not unexpected. Corey, yeah, good question about the highest winds expected. Really depends on your elevation. So I'm terrible about remembering to think about winds because I live in a valley in South Londonderry, and so even when it's windy, I'm not really that windy at my house. So, but if you're at elevation, especially if you're an eastern-facing slope, 35 to 45 miles an hour, definitely possible. If you get higher up, if you're above 2,000 feet in eastern-facing slope, 50 miles an hour is not, wouldn't be surprising. I wouldn't be surprised, if you got up to the top of Stratton tonight for some reason. I don't know why you'd be up there tonight, but I guess if you're grooming tonight, 65, 70 mile an hour winds for the tops of the hills, of the mountains. At elevations where there's people, mostly 35 to 45 mile an hour winds, so that shouldn't be a huge problem power outage wise. I'm a little nervous with starting with some of this rain. The first part of this system is going to be quite sticky snow. And it really only takes like 5 or 6 inches, about a half-inch liquid equivalent, half to 3/4 inch liquid equivalent of snow that's very sticky and pasty to start causing power outage issues. And then you add a little bit of wind on that. The snow will get less sticky as time goes. So I think if you're going to lose power, it's likely to happen before mid-morning to noon tomorrow, although maybe some wind issues as the wind will be strongest tomorrow afternoon. So everybody should be prepared. I'm usually try to be pretty prepared. I will, you want to make sure your cell phone's charged. You've got water set aside if you're on well water and you don't have a generator that runs your well pump. If you've got a generator, you want to make sure you got all the things you need to make sure it's going to run for you. I know most people do have generators around us, but at least in the more rural areas around here, because you could be out for a bit. There's certainly somebody will probably. A few communities will probably be places, and I don't know if it'll be southern Vermont. I think the Monadnock region is more likely for that in New Hampshire, but and maybe down into kind of central Massachusetts, Worcester Hills, that kind of area, where power outages could become a huge problem. But some places somebody is going to get power outages that extend for more than just a couple of hours. Extend for a day or two is definitely possible. This system in some ways is pretty similar in terms of impacts, except this is a little windier, to the system we had back in December, where I had about 20 inches of snow at my house, and it was pretty heavy wet, but it wasn't real sticky. And that is the difference of half a degree. Because places south and east of here were a little heavier, a little stickier with the snow. A lot of places in very southeastern Windham County lost power for that system. And we certainly could do that. There's certainly some areas that could do that with this storm. Hard to know exactly where that's going to happen. But everybody should be prepared to potentially lose power. The only place I wouldn't be too worried about it, you're up in like Rutland, not really a big concern up that way. I think one, it won't be quite as much precipitation. I think you're out of the heaviest of the snow, and a little bit further north, a little bit drier, a little bit less sticky with the snow in a place like Rutland as well. I'd be, in terms of southern Vermont, most concerned in and around Brattleboro, I would think, and maybe over in Bennington as well, and up the Connecticut River a bit, and in the foothills. I think it'll be stickier and pastier in those locations. Wind issues, though, would be more likely in the hills, eastern-facing slopes. If you're a place that loses power quite often, on windy days, you should be prepared to at least have a chance for that too. That's funny. So my son Daniel is asking what the storm on the West Coast is. This is just like a parade. There is a parade of storms in the kind of heading on shore. Once again, California is about to get a bunch more rain and snow. And that is actually part of what got our system going here across the eastern part of the country. We do have a very busy weather pattern going on currently, kind of globally. The northern hemisphere is very active at the moment. Okay, let's take a look. I want to take a look at temperatures, because that's going to explain part of why we still do have some rain going on here. Sorry, I got to get my cursor in the right spot here and see if we can't zoom in one more time, maybe. I might have to refresh. Sorry about that. Excuse the internet. Now we're looking at New Jersey and Pennsylvania. I don't know why it always defaults to that for me. I bet somebody else online here knows that, and I should probably figure it out someday. Let's get settings, dark map, so you can hopefully see what's going on here. Okay. You can see that we are, especially at elevation, we're starting to get down to around freezing, but we still are above freezing in the valleys. It's going to take a little bit of time for areas like in the Route 7 corridor here, Manchester, Arlington, down to Bennington. You're still in the mid 30s to upper 30s even. It's going to take a bit to get those temperatures down to freezing, so you're going to see a little bit of drizzle to start. You will change to snow. We're definitely changing to snow by the time things really get going, but just to kind of give you an idea, we are at least going to start with some of that kind of stuff. We also are a little bit above freezing in the Connecticut River Valley. Again, temperatures will drop there as well. Most of us at elevation, anything that looks like about over 500 or 750 feet, looks like we're basically at least down close to freezing now. Still, I had a few sprinkles mixed in with the snowflakes as I was walking over this evening, but that should change over as precipitation gets heavier. It will change to all snow. Those areas where it's a bit above freezing now, yes, the temperatures will come down, but those would be the areas that I'm concerned, particularly. Maybe the Route 7 corridor, we'll have to wait and see about that, but I would be a little more concerned down and around Brattleboro. This is the area I'm more concerned about in terms of power outages. But again, we'll have to see on that. Let's see. What else was I going to talk about tonight? Oh, National Weather Service. Just wanted to kind of give you an idea here. Let's zoom in on this a little bit so that you can see better what's going on. Not surprisingly, the National Weather Service, of course, always wants to put it right where you can't see what's going on here. There we go. We are entirely under a winter storm warning. The National Weather Service, just to give you an idea, after I disagreed with them on the last storm, I should be careful to disagree with them. But their storm prediction here in terms of snowfall, what they're looking for, and I think they're pretty comparable with me, and I would tend to agree with the way that they've anticipated this storm. They're looking at generally 12 to 18 inches of snow for the valley locations, 18 to 24 for the foothills, and then the peaks are looking 24 to 30. That's probably a reasonable forecast. I think maybe the 24 to 30 is a little bit ambitious, although I do think some people will see that much snow. So that's a pretty good indication of what we're looking at snowfall total-wise. National Weather Service has a lot of interesting products out there. They do a good job with these winter storms. One of the things they do that they've done in the last 2 or 3 years, they have the high end, what they would expect maybe on a high end situation. So this would be, they would say this is like, there's about a 10% chance that this would happen. There we're talking 2 to 2.5 feet of snow for us here. That's definitely possible that we could end up with totals like that. This is like, they try to be highest reasonable options. And then the lowest amount, again, I think these are pretty interesting products. And I think they give you a good idea of like your possible outcomes. So a 10% chance that something like this happens with about a foot of snow for a lot of valley locations, up to about anywhere from 16 to 20 to 18 inches of snow for a lot of the higher elevations. So I think we'll probably come in somewhere obviously in between those numbers. For the northern part of that, so Albany only covers the southern 2 counties in Vermont. Actually, just as an as an interesting piece of information, Burlington covers the northern parts or covers most of the state of Vermont and upstate New York, and they cover both Rutland and Windsor counties. And they're, again, a little bit, obviously, as you get up into Rutland and Windsor counties, we're getting a little bit less snow. The heaviest band is not quite as likely to make its way north. Okay, so it's been 20 minutes, almost 23 minutes. Happy to keep talking if people have questions. Otherwise, if you don't, that's perfectly fine. Let's take a couple more looks at radar just so that we can it's getting exciting out there. Yeah, it's going to load. It is going to load, maybe. Let me try to reload so we don't lose that frame. Hopefully that frame is not just gone. Maybe? Ooh. Well, even before, let me try to put it in motion and see what happens here. Yeah. So here you can really see we are, we're getting into some heavy duty enhancement of the snow, and we're also getting into that steady snow here, really. And as you can look, and we look closely up, well, that's a little too close. And I can put we'll put the county boundaries on so you can get a better idea of where things are. You can see here where we've got rain going on, and again, this radar does tend to overdo things sometimes. Will the wind be coming mainly from the south with the storm? Actually, mostly from the east, and then it'll turn northeast, Dan. That's a good question. So eastern-facing slopes, northeastern-facing slopes. Right now, it's still coming from this kind of a southeast direction for a little bit longer, but pretty soon we're going to turn over to an east and then a northeast direction for the wind. And so basically, if you're on a slope that faces that direction, that's where you get the heaviest of the winds. That's a good question. Eventually tomorrow we'll actually turn all the way around to a northerly direction as the storm starts to depart, and then Wednesday it'll be breezy from the northwest. But I don't think Wednesday will be breezy enough to cause issues, except for maybe some holds on at the mountains. So wind holds for like the gondola at Stratton, which often does get, if it's windy, wind holds are definitely possible. And same thing could happen to like the bubble chairs at Okemo and things like that, where you've got that strong northwesterly flow. If you've gone skiing on a powder day after a big snowstorm, it's very common that you get that northwesterly flow, and so you get some of those wind holds. I think it shouldn't be terrible, so you should be able to get out there, and they'll drop pretty quickly. But okay, but you can see also as the precipitation gets heavier, you can see like here where we had some running up I believe that's the Williams River Valley. That's a bit of a guess. If I'm wrong, you can point it out to me in chat, or text me, or email me. Let me know. Some of my geography in Vermont is still occasionally. Anyways, but up that valley, up the valley there, yeah, that's got to be it, the Williams River, because it's heading up towards Chester. So that is giving you. It could be Saxon's River. Who knows? I bet somebody here does, but I'm not sure. But anyways, you can see as the precipitation gets heavier that we're changing over to snow in the river valleys there. Still got a ways to go here for the Route 7 corridor, and still got a little bit of a ways to go right here in the right along the Connecticut River. So right now we're elevation driven. That will all change to snow eventually. It'll just be a little heavier and wetter, and won't snow quite as hard in the valley locations. Any other questions for me tonight? It's been a lot of fun. I haven't done this, like I said, in quite a while. Thanks for sticking around. Will we be getting any rain on the tail end? No. Once we change to snow, you're snow. And actually, the snow will get fluffier as we go. Because what's going to happen is once the storm really wraps up, let me go to one of my maps that might kind of show this that I've got here. That one. And let me go to the correct screen and let me expand that. So by tomorrow evening, the storm, actually what the storm is going to do is it's going to come up the coast, and then it's going to kind of do a loop over eastern Massachusetts. Exactly how big the loop is, how far west it goes, we'll determine exactly how long we hold on to the heavier snow. But by Tuesday evening, by this time we've got northwesterly winds as we're wrapping the snow up, and so tomorrow afternoon the snow should get fluffier. That'll be offset a little bit by sun angle. It's very the sun angle is obviously pretty high here in mid-March, so that will somewhat limit things. But hypothetical guess from Jeff. If temperatures were high 20s, would the mounts be much more or similar? We aren't going to be. We could, if we were a little bit cooler than this, we would certainly have. We would certainly have a chance for ratios to be higher. So we talk about snow ratios. Usually, nationwide, the average on snow ratios is about 10 inches of snow for every 1 inch of liquid water. And your model, whenever you ever see any, if you follow Twitter weather or anything like that, you'll see that there is model data, or there's the models will get popped up, and they'll have where's I going? Oh, models will have, we're going to have this much snow. All those snowfall maps are just take the liquid equivalent they're expecting, that's snow, and go 10 to 1. But snow does not obviously always fall like that. Climatologically, in southern Vermont, we're actually more like 12 or 13 to 1, usually on average. This storm will probably be closer to 10 to 1, especially the beginning of the storm. Could even be like an 8 to 1. Sometimes you can get snow when you get that really pasty stuff. That can be 5 or 6 inches to 1. So this will probably be about 8 to 1 to start, but I bet the snow by tomorrow afternoon is closer to climatological average, so closer to 12 or 13 inches to 1. So if we were in the high 20s and a little bit cooler, sun angle wasn't quite as high, we would probably be looking at an additional, right now we're looking at 2 to 2.5 inches of liquid equivalent. So that's how you get the 20 to 25 inches of snow for us right now. If you were 13 inches to 1, that would be closer to 2.5 to 3 feet of snow. So it'd be another 6-7 inches of snow. Do you prefer, Gary, good question, do you prefer the European models or the U.S. weather models? Historically, I would say they go back and forth, and the reason for that is basically the physics, or basically the math that goes into modeling both of them is pretty similar. They both work on about the same grid, or the density of data points that go into them. What changes, and they change this pretty consistently, and it's not always. Sometimes it's this is really inside info, but they change the physics packages that go into them, which is sort of the ways that they try to account for stuff that can't be modeled by the model. They do that usually through a whole bunch of statistical niftiness. Niftiness. Yeah, sure. Let's go statistical niftiness. They try to find, and so they don't. So it kind of does go back and forth sometimes. Uh, there was a good period during the late like 2010s where I think for quite a while the European model was more consistently good than the American model. The GFS, which is the main American model, has performed pretty well the last couple of years against the European model. They've been pretty similar. And then we have a whole suite of other models now. There's a lot of mesoscale models. The NAM, the North American model, which is they're global models versus area size models kind of work in a whole different way. You use like wave functions for global models versus more of a grid setup for mesoscale models for grid models. But the NAM, again, same thing. Sometimes it's really good. Particularly as you get closer in, it picks up on details, and they run the NAM at different. Sometimes they run the normal one at 12 grid point every 12 kilometers. They also run a 3 kilometer one, so there's a data point every 3 kilometers. Also, and then it's always as good as the data that's going in too, right? That is constantly changing as well. We get a lot of, obviously we have places that we do specific measurements, but one of the things that's happened like around us, Albany isn't launching balloons currently. That's been on hold in Albany for a couple reasons. I think they needed to upgrade some of their piping for their helium system, and also helium is very expensive right now. There's kind of a global shortage, so for a whole bunch of reasons, some not really associated with atmospheric launches. But anyways, so they haven't been doing balloon launches, but we do have some. We fill in some of that gap with satellite data. We've gotten better and better at interpreting different layers of the atmosphere with satellite information. So, but obviously, even at the surface, we don't have a reliable temperature measurement every 3 kilometers, not even close. So the data going in also affects how well that can really perform. I could talk all day about models, but so one of the things that you try to, like this storm, the models have had a really good handle basically on what was going to happen for quite some time. But as often happens with these when there's a lot of convection, they really struggle with what to do with the low pressure system. And there were several times where the models wanted to make this kind of into a double barrel low coming up the coast. All experience will tell you that just doesn't happen. That's like kind of physically impossible, but the models will keep modeling it that way. So sometimes you got to use some experience to say, yeah, that's it's trying to figure out like an elongated low, and it wants to make it into two central lows, but in reality, it may be elongated as kind of that trough and a low, which is what's eventually going to happen here, and then it will eventually all consolidate. But it's not going to happen quite the way that a couple of the models want to do. There was a couple that wanted to have a lows dancing around each other. That's not the way that the atmosphere works. Anyways, I did have another question. Avid asked me another question. Sorry, I missed that. It's 5 minutes ago. But yes, he was asking about Wednesday morning school, and I think definitely a possibility. It could snow well into Tuesday night, lightly accumulating snow maybe through midnight on Tuesday into Wednesday. So I think the late openings are definitely a possibility if you're for school. Tomorrow, school is not happening. Nowhere in southern Vermont is school happening. But Wednesday, school at the late openings possible. And if some places get like that 2 to 3 feet of snow, no school on Wednesday is possible in some locations. I think the 2 to 3 feet is most likely in the mountain towns, and the mountain towns tend to get cleaned up a little bit faster even if they get that much snow. So probably everybody goes to school on Wednesday, but I would not be surprised to have delayed openings on Wednesday. Okay. Any other questions? Great questions tonight. Lots of fun. Went a little bit longer than I was anticipating, but you asked questions. So I'm trying to think if I had anything else I wanted to share with you. We'll take one more look at radar because it's just pretty. If you're interested in the weather, and I gotta remember how to do that. Scene 3. There we go. Yes. Let's take a wider look one more time. And you can really see that axis of precipitation. Let's zoom out one more place here. You can really already see where where the trough, well, you kind of have surging north, but this is kind of your trough axis here currently. And the question is how far north? Obviously, you're pushing north here. Eventually, it'll kind of set up in a more east to west measure as we get, as the weather gets, as the storm is pulling to the north. And then as the storm starts to pull a little bit further east, it'll kind of go northwest to or southwest to northeast, and then eventually kind of north-south again. And the question is, there'll be a spot where that kind of pivots around, and you'll kind of stay under the heavier band. And we don't really have a heavy band set it up quite yet. We're getting heavier precipitation really breaking up, but we don't have too much banding. I mean, you see the beginning of potentially some banding here and a little bit of a band here that's kind of coming through, but nothing really developed yet. So when that happens, that's when we'll have the chance to see those bigger, where that's going to eventually end up. And it's just a matter of, do you end up under a really, really intense band, in which case the snow totals just go through the roof, or do you just end up in the normal heavy snow and you end up with, 1.5 to 2 feet of snow. All right. I think that's probably a good place to stop. Thanks everybody for joining me. It was kind of fun tonight. I haven't done this in a while. I think I'm going to have a video for you tomorrow morning. Probably. Two reasons I wouldn't have a video for you tomorrow morning. One, if I lose power, obviously, I'll maybe post an update for my phone on Facebook, but I won't have a video for you. And two, if I don't have power, or even if I have power, but a lot of places around me don't have power, sometimes firefighting stuff gets in the way. So a lot of fun. Thanks for joining me, and I will be back probably at some point tomorrow. I'll try to, unless I really don't have power all day, I'll have some sort of video for you. So talk about the storm. Okay. Stay safe out there. Enjoy the snow. Go slow shoveling tomorrow. It's going to be heavy, and we'll see you.